Good to be back. Hello, everybody. Of course, I did do a show on Monday, so I guess I've been back, yes. But of course, yesterday I had to take a little brief hiatus, and good to be back today. Let's just start there. Folks, we are one day away from the NFL Draft 2024. I know you can hear the jingle. It's going down in Detroit Rock City. That's for the rest of the country. For us here in Philadelphia, it's going down to Nick's Roast Beef on Woodhaven Road. We will be live, the Gambler Gang, for the NFL Draft, but the NBA basketball gods, the Sixers gods, did us a favor and threw us a game 3 where we're down 0-2. A lot to consume tomorrow night with the emphasis on consume at Nick's Roast Beef starting at 7:30. Gambler Gang will be live. We'll have giveaways, all that and more. Specials, 50-cent wings. I'm telling you, plenty of screens. This is the place to catch all the action. I'm going to be DJing maybe a little afterwards. We're going to have some fun. All right, putting that to the side, we're going to have some fun right here, right now, because joining me from the jump, host of the Tough Cover radio show, the head coach himself, Mark Henry Jr., live on the Daily Ticket. Good to catch up with Mark. How you doing today, sir?
Doing well, besides, Sixerland, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. But my focus is all on the draft. I don't even know what's going. There's a game tomorrow. I don't know.
Yes. So, and of course, we will be missing you, but this is something that Mark Henry Jr. is a draft man. So he looks forward to this. His favorite day on the calendar for you?
Yeah. This is my favorite single day on the. It's tough. I always say the 2 days of March Madness are the two best days of the year, the first 2 days. But if I might take the single first night over either single day. It's up in the air, one of those two.
All right. Well, excellent. And your coverage can be found where you'll be rocking out with a good group, as you always have. Where can we find your coverage tomorrow night?
Yeah, it'll be over at Edge of Philly Sports on YouTube. We have producers back in the booth this year. We got graphics and highlight packages, trying to do it a little bit more professional this year instead of us sitting around drinking, yelling about the Eagles. So we've put a ton of work in this year, way more work than we've put in the previous years. Really looking forward to it. I do it over there with Dives, who's been on the show, Mr. Crockpot, and my co-host on Chalk Talk, Shane Half. Shane Half is one of the best in the biz, so he'll be streaming on his Twitter as well.
Excellent. Well, look forward to hear all those takes and hopefully some winning predictions. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here. Just, from the standpoint of where we're at when it comes to gambling on the NFL draft, it sucks because PA, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. So that's essentially why I don't really invest too much time into the NFL draft from a gambling sense. Now, we do mess with Cut. We are partners with Cut over at KUTT.com. DraftKings can't find anything. Cut will have plenty to choose from, and that's what we're going to be rocking out tomorrow night. Again, though, from my standpoint, I just handle the draft as a fan, okay? Yeah. I'm an Eagles fan. I'm an NFL fan, and that's what I want to talk to you about, some big bullet points here, and I think a lot of people can get down with that because, of course, I just want to bring this up, too. The beauty about wagering on the NFL draft is getting in front of it and getting that crazy number and finding the value and of course predicting. You're hoping you're right, but I'll give you right from the jump. Mark Henry Jr., Texas defensive tackle Byron Murphy last week was as high as 16-1 at some shots. First defensive player off the board last week. He's now plus 175 to plus 300 range. I'm not going to sit here and tell you don't take that, but you missed a ton of value last week. So if you're not in front of these from the gambling sense, it's really tough to make money, correct, on the NFL draft?
Yeah, I think in general, betting on the draft is hard unless you've got some inside info or unless you get on it early. People have some crazy JJ McCarthy tickets that I know people are touting these days from before his kind of rise. But I think that's really where the value is. And I usually find one or two things on the eve of the draft that are exciting to me. I know there's some books that are offering like 7.5 over under offensive linemen. I think that'll be over, but I haven't seen a whole ton. I did a whole draft props show last night with Shane and Dives, and not a whole ton that's jumping out to me in terms of crazy value.
All right, excellent stuff. Now, what is your take on the Murphy deal there? Is he going to be the first defensive player off the board?
So it's funny you mentioned that because Jeremiah has really been the one piping that. Daniel Jeremiah, probably at this point the leading draft analyst in the field, I'd say. He has been saying that he wouldn't be surprised if Murphy ends up being the first defender taken. I think he goes top 20, but I would guess that Dallas Turner, who's still the favorite to be the first defensive player taken, will be. I think he could go anywhere from 7 to Tennessee, 8 to Atlanta, or 9 to Chicago. It's not absurd that Byron Murphy could enter that discussion. I don't think he should, but there's a chance that he will.
Dallas Turner, linebacker out of Alabama. Excellent, excellent. Now, this first round will be a just as far as slants are concerned. This is an offensive first
Yeah.
round, correct? I read last week that this could break the record for most This was Schefter actually to put that out. Most offensive players taken in the first round. Is that how you're seeing it as well?
Yeah, I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure the record was 19 first round offensive players. The over unders 21 and a half, and I'd go over slightly. So yeah, I think it would be crazy if it didn't break the record. In fact, to be quite honest. So it's just that slanted towards offense. On my big board, my top 6 are all offensive players. 7 of my top 8 all offensive players. Then it starts to get a little bit more into the defensive side of things, but just really top heavy in terms of that side of the ball this year, especially at the skill positions.
So, from the gambling perspective, I do know a lot of people that are in our industry for as far as talking heads on the mic. They're trying to find that inside information, what you pointed out. And a lot of them go to the mock drafts. A lot of them go to the insiders, right? The Peter Schrager's, like you just said, all the guys like the Schefters, everyone the Daniel Jeremiah, all the names we know. And then they'll go ahead and take some of the information that they're putting out there, the nuggets, the stuff that they're hearing, and apply that. Is there somebody's mock draft? Is there a specific insider that you lean towards more over the years that's delivered in your mind? Is there someone that you go to first as far as that is concerned?
I think Jeremiah is probably the number one guy. I do think Schrager is good with certain just nuggets on certain teams. And you threw in the chat we were talking about today that he thinks there could be 6 quarterbacks taken. Normally, if I heard
in the first 15 picks,
first
15 picks,
and what that tells you is that Bo Nix is really the driving factor of that take, because there's going to be 4 in the top, maybe 5 picks, let alone, who knows? There's going to be 4 off the board really fast. Then it comes down to Penix and Nix. A lot of smoke around Penix, potentially 13 to the Raiders, potentially some other spots in that range. So really what that take comes down to is Bo Nix. Normally, I would hear that and I'd be like, I don't know what to make of that, But the one thing I'll say, and this is kind of being in the weeds a little bit, Peter Schrager's friends with Sean Payton. He did the Fox show with him 2 years ago. Last year when he was going on the Bill Simmons pod, he would constantly reference conversations he was ongoing, having with Sean Payton while he was the coach of the Broncos. I wouldn't be surprised if he's got some nuggets that Denver's interested in Bo Nix. Now, I think it would be really surprising if Bo Nix went in the first round. And you mentioned guys that I trust. Jeremiah is one. Another guy who's out of work right now in terms of being on TV that I really trust is, and I've always loved McShay. I'm a big McShay guy. He's been going on the Russillo pod, and that's kind of where you can find kind of his draft takes. And on his Twitter, I think he had some non-compete with ESPN. He came out and said that he hasn't talked to a single scout or GM around the league that has told him that they think Bo Nix is a starter, that they all think he's a backup. They don't think he'll even go in round 2. So it's hard to kind of parse through when you hear Schrager drop that. You hear Jeremiah say he could sneak into the back end of the first, and then you hear McShay say probably not the first 2 rounds. So grain of salt with everything, but it's all kind of, you have to add it all together and make your decision from there.
What do you think about Bo Nix at the next level?
I think he's a little bit too much of a screen merchant. He is accurate. He can move a little bit. He's not the guy that I would take the risk on to be my franchise quarterback. He's my QB6.
QB6.
There's a time, I think, at the beginning. I'm pretty out, to be honest, on Penix, JJ, and Nix. I have them all well out of the first round in my rankings, out of my top 45. Penix and JJ sneak into the top 50. Nix is somewhere around the late 50s in my rankings. Earlier on in the process, that would have been more bunched together. But the upside of Penix, if he's able to stay healthy, and with the way that he did test at the combine, forced me to kind of maybe be a little bit more positive on him than I was going into the process. And then JJ, the traits are all there. It's hard to ignore, even if I have some problems with the way that he's been treated as a prospect. Um, I think that there's more upside with JJ than Nick. I think the upside with Knicks is like a solid below average starting quarterback. That's probably the upside, which, if you can get that, there's some value to that, but I wouldn't take him until the back end of the second.
I agree. I'm definitely a Penix guy over JJ. I'm a Penix guy
Agreed.
over Bo Nix as well. But again, the injury there, you have to be concerned about that. And of course, when you are in this position as a general manager in the NFL, which is something we will talk about a little bit later in this hit here with Mark Henry Jr., you got to factor in the contract and what's going to happen that second time or that first time that they come out of that rookie deal. And you're talking about a quarterback here. That guy better deliver. If we're going to be splitting hairs over running backs, wide receivers, other positions, quarterback has to be at the top. So you better get that right. But on the flip side, if you don't have a quarterback, are you really going to play for anything worthwhile? That's the question you have to answer as a general manager, right?
Yeah, no, it is. It's an interesting conversation because we were having it in the group chat today where Joe Tanzi said I would take Marvin Harrison Jr. at 3 if I was the Patriots, and Beef chimed in and said this is if they do take a quarterback, it's the worst situation possible for a quarterback to go to. Which, by the way, I agree.
Yeah,
There's no keepers on that New England offense right now. There's
I
that.
agree.
You look at the defense, and there's actually like you could talk yourself into the defense being really good next year if Gerard Mayo is a good coach. They are starting from ground zero on the offensive side of the football in New England. So it's an interesting conversation where you say, do you not take a quarterback because you have nothing else around it? Or where I kind of fall with John Jansen, I would say you can't let that decide. You can't let that make your decision when there's a guy you think can be a superstar quarterback, because that's the foundation of everything. You can figure the rest out. Even if you're Drake May, it's a terrible situation to go into New England, undoubtedly, I think. But if you're New England, you can't worry about that. You have to make the best decision for your future, and you have to figure out the quarterback position. So that's where I'm at with New England. I think and just to kind of wrap it back into that pick, I think New England has to stay at 3 and has to take Drake May, especially since it's not going to be Jaden Daniels. It seems like he's going to go 2 to Washington. I think Drake May is the clear second best quarterback in this draft class. And I think New England would be making a huge mistake if they trade down or if they were to, take a receiver. I think it would be more likely that they trade down.
Yeah, I think it would be as well. And what if they got a king's ransom, right? What if the Giants were willing to give up an S ton to move up and get him at number 3? What if there was a team out there like the Denver Broncos, the Vikings, wanted to slide up to 3, right? Like you just said that there's no worse spot in the NFL right now. It's bare bones up there in New England, which I think we all realize that. Definitely on the offensive side. New coach, so he's going to have some time. But again, you got to be really cautious with that. You're following up Bill Belichick there. I don't think that's the worst move for New England. I really don't. But it's just beauty in the eye of the beholder. If Drake May is your guy, go ahead and grab him because he will be there. Quickly on this, though. So where does it get shook up? If you think 1 and 2 are pretty much locked in with Williams and Daniels to DC, where does this shake up in the NFL draft? Is it pick 3? Are we waiting 4, 5, 6? Where do we get off the main drag and hit some of these side streets?
I'd say 5 or 6. It depends because I do think I don't think the Patriots trade out. I think we get Williams, Daniels, May, and I think Arizona. Another thing I believe pretty wholeheartedly, they should take it. They should stick it 4. Don't mess around. Don't get cute. Don't take Malik Neighbors. Don't trade down. Draft Marvin Harrison Jr. He's a special prospect. He's the best wide receiver prospect I've ever evaluated, and it's not particularly close. I think that he is just a guy who I expect to be a top 15 receiver the minute he steps in the league. He's that good from a route running perspective. He's that good at taking the top off the defense. He's that good at the little things, the intangibles at the wide receiver position. You cannot let him pass. So then it's number 5, Jim Harbaugh. Do you trade down? I think that's where it happens. I think Minnesota probably trades up to that number 5 spot and they move up and they give up 11 and 23 to move up to 5, and the Chargers move back. To be honest, I think the Chargers are in desperate need of a playmaker. They got rid of Keenan Allen, got rid of Mike Williams. They don't have a tight end. Austin Eckler's gone. I don't want to hear the Justin Herbert truthers yelling at me when they go 7-10 again about how they have no weapons. So the Chargers, I think, should honestly stick at 5 and take a receiver, whether it be Neighbors, whether it be Odunze. I would prefer Odunze. It seems like the NFL prefers Neighbors. I think they have to go and get a wide receiver. Maybe you can move down to 11 and 23 and move your way back up and make sure you get one of those guys. But I think the Chargers need a receiver. The buzz about them going and drafting a tackle, and I get it. Jim Harbaugh, runs in the trenches and he wants the big uglies. They've got a good O-line. Like, it's one of the positives about taking over the Chargers. You have Rashawn Slater on one side. On the other side, you have a solid offensive tackle. You're pretty good in the interior O-line. You can use a little help at one spot there, but the Chargers really need help on the outside, not the inside. So, but that's that's kind of where the draft is going to be decided.
Okay, and then from there we go to the New York Giants at 6, and they're in an interesting spot, or are they? Right? You think they are because you how we value Daniel Jones. It's clear they look at him in a different light. So if you're the New York Giants, where do you go at 6?
This is the one where I have no idea what I would do if I were the GM. This is the one I toss and turn on a little bit. Like, I'm out on Daniel Jones. There's part of me that thinks you have to figure out a way to go and get a quarterback. Honestly, if I was the GM, I'd probably do whatever I could to get up to 3 to try to draft Drake May. That would be my ultimate strategy. If that's not the case, let's say New England takes May at 3 and you're sitting there, Arizona's on the clock at 4, the top 3 QBs are gone. You can get JJ if you want. I wouldn't do that. I'm not high on JJ, clearly. So at that point, it becomes, you really need a receiver, you really need an offensive tackle. You can kind of go anywhere you want with Odunze, Neighbors, or Joe Alt. I would probably lean receiver, and it seems like I'm saying that for a lot of teams, but I said it for 4, 5, and 6 now. I think you could even consider a Brock Bowers if you wanted to in this situation. I don't think they will. Seems like the NFL is a little bit lower on Bowers than me and many draft analysts are. I don't know, where that comes from. Maybe it's the lack of testing. Maybe the size isn't exactly what you want from a top 5 pick at the tight end position. But I think we've seen enough on tape of Brock Bowers to say he should be in the conversation at that pick. But I wouldn't have a problem with them taking any of, the Giants are in a rare situation, honestly, where I don't know what pick they could make that I'd be like, that's a bad pick. Like, if they took a quarterback, I'd be like, yeah, they have to give up on Daniel Jones. If they took Joe Alt, I'd be like, yeah, Evan Neal's a disaster. If they took a receiver, they don't have a good receiver on the roster confirmed yet. So they took a tight end, Bowers a beast. Like, they're in a rare situation where I could kind of excuse anything they want to do.
Is Joe Alt a surefire thing at the next level?
No. I think he's being sold as such because he's the number 1 offensive lineman, and I'm sure people are, confused to hear me not be gung-ho about a Notre Dame Fighting Irishman, but he's not a perfect offensive line prospect in the way we've seen with some of the other top guys in years past. I do think he's getting a little inflated. I mean, I still have him 8th overall. So I still love the prospect. He's 6'7". He's huge. He's a monster. There's just a couple things this year. He wasn't quite as good this year as he was the previous year at Notre Dame. So I don't think my argument would be to that. Like, I just don't think there's a ton separating Alt from Fashanu and Flaga. They're my Olu Fashanu from Penn State and Talisi Flaga from Oregon State are my number 2 and number 3 offensive tackles. I have them at like 13 and 14, and I have Alt at 8. If someone took Fashanu over Alt, I think there would be a large percentage of the draft, the draft nuts that would be like, what a bad pick, and how could you do that? And I'd be like, yeah, I would have taken Alt, but I don't think there's a huge gap.
All right, and then the Bears coming up at 9, which is interesting. We know that they have the number 1 overall pick with Caleb Williams. I'm not going to sit here and say they got to go defense, but I'm curious from the perspective of, look, there's probably a million and one ways you could wager on the NFL draft, and I'm sure the Chicago Bears will pop up at some sort of yes or no. Will they pick a defensive player here? I would lean towards defense at this point in time because of you just took a number 1 overall pick on the offense, plus their offense is pretty darn good in the grand scheme of things with the additions that they've made in the past 2 seasons. Where do you see that number 9 spot for the Bears? Is it possible that they trade out? Do they attack the defense? Is it best man available, which is entire cliche, but factually true, right? It is true in to some sense. Where do you see the Chicago Bears going at number 9 there?
Yeah, I mean, the Chicago Bears, I feel pretty passionately about this one. There's a lot of people throwing receivers out there. And like I said, I love the receivers. I think a lot of these teams should take them. This is a situation you need an edge rusher. You need a guy who can get to the passer. Their leading sack, their leading sack getter last year was Montez Sweat. He played 9 games for them. He played 9 games and got 6 sacks. Their number 2 sack getter had 4.5 sacks. He's on the Arizona Cardinals now. The number 3 sack getter, Yannick Ngakoue, had 4 sacks. He's a free agent now. There's just no returning pass rushing ability coming back to this team. You have a team that's extremely talented in the secondary, really good at linebacker. I mean, we know it. TJ Edwards is there on a deal we should have kept him on. Edmonds is there as well. They have another linebacker that I'm forgetting the name of right now, but I think Sanborn. They have a lot of guys in the back 7 of that defense. And you have Eberflus is your head coach. He's a defensive guy. He coached them up in the second half of last year to be a pretty good defense down the stretch. All you need now is that stud edge rusher that can get after the passer. I know the inclination is, you know what? We have to help Caleb out. We just drafted him first overall. We've never had a good quarterback in our franchise's history. We need to get a receiver in there. But they have Keenan Allen. You just, instead of getting an extra first-round pick last year from the Panthers, you got DJ Moore for this exact purpose. You have Cole Kmet at tight end. You just signed DeAndre Swift. I am of the opinion at this point that you need to go and get a Dallas Turner from Alabama, a Latu Latu from UCLA, even a Jared Verse from Florida State. You need someone that can get after the passer.
I think that would be the right move for the Chicago Bears because of everything you just laid out with the additions in the last 2 seasons. And I know Caleb Williams, the expectations will be through the roof. He's a rookie, but like easy. You got to have the future in mind as well. So go and get a defensive guy, work on that side of the ball for everything you just said. Fantastic stuff. Mark Henry Jr., Tough Cover Show, heard right here on The Gambler every Saturday from 11 to 1. This is his time to shine. It's draft season, kids. All right. Now we keep it moving, and let's not waste any more time. Let's get to the Birds. Birds at 22. Hey, have you heard that Howie Roseman could possibly trade up, maybe trade back? Oh, I don't come on, man. Just if that's your tweet, go away. Anyways, what are the Birds going to do in your mind right now? What is your expectation as we're heading into tomorrow night? Does Howie Roseman get aggressive? Should he be aggressive? Do you think he stays put? Think he trades back? Where are you at on that?
I would probably prefer not to trade up. I would like to keep the 50th and 53rd picks. I think we know they have a lot of needs on this roster. I mean, you really need a corner. I wouldn't mind a safety. You really need a linebacker. I'm sure we will be adding to the offensive and defensive lines at points of this draft, whether or not we think they have needs at those spots, or if it's a little too early, there's going to be players added in the trenches. That's what Howie Roseman does. I'd like as many kind of bites at the apple as possible in a draft that I do think is really strong in the second round. So you probably will have to give up a second rounder, maybe a third rounder if you want to move up in the first round. It's not what I would want to do. So there's only 2 guys, maybe 3 guys who you could sell me on, where if they move up, I'll be excited about it. If they move up for Brock Bowers, I would be excited about it. Whether or not it's a need, I think Brock Bowers is a good enough player that it's just something that you have to make happen. If it's something that you can make happen within, a reasonable trade. Terrion Arnold is, for obvious purposes, an obvious one that I would be fine with trading up for. He's the number 1 corner in this class, one of the last Nick Saban DBs that will get a chance here to draft in the first round. His ball skills are phenomenal. Really, really just exploded onto the scene this year as a true top 10 pick. But seems like he could fall a little bit into the mid to late teens. If that happens, I wouldn't mind Howie picking up the phone. Then the last one, I have no idea where this guy is going to go. Cooper DeJean is a guy that I love. Defensive back from Iowa. The Caucasian cornerback, going to be the first one to start an NFL game since Jason Sehorn, probably. It's pretty insane. And I have a little bit of a thing that I'll bring up with Cooper DeJean. There's some people out there that think he's a safety, and not to go like reverse racism here. I just think that's because he's white. Like, he's an outside cornerback. Like, he played all of his snaps there. Like, I know he played some snaps, here or there in the box.
Is he going to be good at the next level?
I think absolutely. He's a next level athlete. He was like a 5-star, basketball player in South Dakota, let alone like a track star. He tested out incredibly well right after he came off of an injury at the end of last year. He recovered from the injury and then ran the 40 and ran even faster than people were expecting.
Mm.
I think this is a guy who I would absolutely love. 7 picks, 20 passes broken up over the last 2 seasons, 9.85 relative athletic score at the cornerback position. He was a first team All American. He was a danger in the special teams. He was returning pick sixes, returning punts. I just think he's a special athlete and a guy who's got a knack for the ball. He's a guy who I think could be there at 22. I wouldn't be surprised if, similar to Brian Branch last year, not to get into the Lions draft. Oh, Jesus, I've been in the mud with the
Yes, you
entire
have.
state of Michigan
Yes, you have.
all night and morning. But I praised their actual good draft pick last year, and the draft pick that made a bigger impact on their team than Jahmyr Gibbs did, Brian Branch. Brian Branch, they got in the second round. He was a guy I had as a top 15 prospect. He fell all the way to the 40s. I wouldn't be shocked if the same thing happens to DeJean. I have DeJean as the 12th best prospect in the draft. I would love him at 22 for the Eagles. I wouldn't even mind moving up a little bit to get him. I just don't know where he's going to go. I have no idea.
One thing I do know is Mark Henry Jr. is a man last year that took this is your time of year to be in the mud.
Yeah.
Kyle Hamilton, you were extremely
2 years
high
ago.
on.
Yeah.
Oh, that was 2 years ago. Sorry. Who the hell did we
Yeah,
draft
we would have
last
won
year?
the Super Bowl if they drafted
That's right.
Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, so Kyle Hamilton 2 years ago, and you were right about that. And of course, you popped up on a lot of people's radars at that point in time. Fantastic work across the board on all things NFL draft. And again, we'll be able to catch your coverage tomorrow live for the NFL draft, kicking off at 8 p.m. Edge of Philly Sports. All right, a couple quick ones before you get out of here, though. I do want to stay with the NFL draft. Just so you know, my good buddy over at ESPN.com, look, this is the mock draft where all the people who cover their teams make their picks. And I just want to throw a name. He has Tyler Guyton from offensive tackle from Oklahoma. Offensive tackle. If the Eagles pull the trigger on an offensive lineman at 22, what do you say to that pick?
I would be miserable. I really don't want an offensive tackle. I need someone who's going to. We're in a win now window with Jalen Hurts and with this roster. We need someone who's going to impact the team right now. And I hear the argument, we're going to take a tackle and we're going to play him at guard, and then we're going to move him to tackle when Lane retires. And it's like, so we're going to draft a guy to play an unnatural position in year one in a win now window because he's going to play a different position in the future. Like, it's not for me. That's not a pick for me. And especially Tyler Guyton. I'm not a big Tyler Guyton guy. Tyler Guyton is a guy that I have ranked as my, I have to check here. I think he's like my number 9 offensive tackle. That's part of just how many good offensive linemen there are in this class. But if you maybe make a prediction on what I think they will do, I think they will take an offensive lineman. I think it'll be Troy Fountain from Washington. That would be my prediction.
All right, we'll write that one down. Last one from the Eagles' perspective for me over here as a fan. I just want to get after the quarterback, and I love Chop Robinson. What do you say to Chop Robinson being selected at that spot?
I'm not a big Chop Robinson guy. He's a second round prospect for me.
Wow.
The traits just don't match the production. Is kind of where the issue is. I don't know if he's a good run stopper. Only 8 sacks over 2 seasons. He's been one of those guys. He's a pressure, it's in a hurries guy, and you could say maybe that turns around to the next level. I think it usually goes the other way. So Chop's actually one of those guys who Dives is really high on Chop Robinson. Shane Haff and I not so much. So he's one of those guys that we kind of argue about a little bit over there.
He played well at Penn State, though, correct?
It's just he didn't get to the quarterback. He pressured the quarterback. He hurried the quarterback. His percentages, his metrics, like PFF loves him. So they graded him out really well, but the raw production wasn't there. So it's hard to kind of match that with that. There's been a lot of edge rushers like that. I'm a little bit of a guy who looks for production in the sack department when it comes to pass rushers.
And only 11 and a half in 3 seasons. So, I'm reading a little bit about boom or bust. So maybe it might be a spot for the Birds to go ahead and pass there. All right. Before you get out, as far as the NFL draft conversation is concerned, Anything for you in the second round that you're looking for the Birds? Third round, who's a player that you're hoping they pull the trigger on? I know there's a million and one to choose from, but you do feel like there's a lot of value in those second and third rounds. Eagles have a couple picks there. Where are you at with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways you could go for sure, and I'll stay on the defensive side of the ball because I really think that's where they really need to focus this year. And an edge rusher that I really like that I think has really fallen in the draft, and I don't understand why. He was a fringe first rounder. Now it's like he might be a third rounder. Braylon Trice is a guy that I just absolutely love. Went to Washington, had eight sacks in 2023, 9 sacks in 2022, 7 pressures against Texas in the college football playoff, had 2 sacks in that game on Quinn Ewers, beat up on Jordan Morgan at Arizona. He's an offensive tackle who's going to go in the first or second round, handed him his worst game of his college career. There's only been one player in the last 2 years that has had a 15 plus pressure game in college football, and his name is Braylon Trice, and he's done it twice. So Braylon Trice is an edge rusher that I'm really interested in. Everyone wants to hear linebacker, so I'll throw some linebackers out there. Edgerrin Cooper is the number 1 linebacker in this class. I think he probably goes before 50 before we have a chance to grab him from Texas A&M. He just kind of has everything that you want, really well rounded. And another guy who's really well rounded, but the size is a little concerning, and the Kobe Dean comparisons are a little concerning. But the bloodline runs deep. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is an obvious candidate on day 2, and I think if I were to make a prediction, I think Howie will do that. I think Howie takes him at like 120. I think Trotter probably falls in the draft due to size, and I think the Eagles stop the slide. So he's a guy I would take a look at. And then one last linebacker I'll throw out there is Peyton Wilson from NC State. He's really risen in the draft. There's a chance he even sneaks into the first round, but he had so many injury issues throughout his time at college. He had a couple knee issues and then had really bad shoulder issues throughout his time in college. But when he plays, he is truly one of the best linebackers I've ever evaluated. He's 6'4" as well, just like a freak at that position. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Landon Dickerson, where Howie saw Landon Dickerson and said, wow, this guy's clearly a top 10 pick, but he has all these injuries. Maybe I'll take the chance on him in the second round and get a guy who maybe can turn into one of the best players at his position. Maybe he does the same thing with Peyton Wilson at linebacker.
Excellent stuff. Mark Henry Jr. every Saturday, Tough Cover Radio Show. He's ready to go. The NFL draft. I can't wait, man. I'm looking forward to, of course, the quarterbacks. Where are these Texas wide receivers going? What are the Birds going to do? On and on. But it's finally here. Hey, before you get out of here, Phillies, where are we at with the Phils right now?
Oh, I thought I almost put my hands to my face if they were going to ask me about another team. The Phillies are doing great. Where I think they're like on pace for 102 wins, 103 wins, something in that range. But yeah, obviously easy schedule to start the year. Offense didn't get started the way we wanted the first 2 weeks, but easy schedule popped up and you took advantage of the easy schedule. You won all 6 games against Chicago and Colorado, and that's all you can ask. Obviously, split the first 2 against Cincinnati. I'm feeling great. I mean, this rotation is just unbelievable. I think it's shameful that they're taking Spencer Turnbull out of it when Taiwan Walker can't hit 89 on the gun. But yeah, I everything besides that, and besides benching Martian Stott against lefties, I'm happy about.
And yes, let's talk Sixers. Is there any shot that this turns into a series, or is it over?
I'll answer with my head down like I'm Joel Embiid.
Yeah, it's over.
Yeah, you don't lose a game like that and win a series. It's just that simple. I think they're the better team. I think they've been the better team twice, and they've lost both games. And that's just such a hard thing to swallow. And after game 1, I was willing to be really critical of the Sixers because 55 rebounds, 33. You didn't get a rebound in the last 4 minutes. The offensive rebound numbers were insane. Joel just didn't look like he had any interest in grabbing rebounds. Game 2, obviously, did they play perfect? No. Are there criticisms to be had? Yeah. They played well enough to win the game, and the NBA came in and decided who won the game. I don't want to get too far into it and sound like such a loser, but the NBA came out and admitted it, and it's not like the last 2-minute report came out and it's like, well, Hart didn't foul him. That wasn't a foul, but Brunson did foul him. But Nick shouldn't have got a timeout. It was Hart fouled him, and Brunson also fouled him, and Nick Nurse also should have gotten the timeout, and also we should have stopped play and called the foul on Joel against DiVincenzo, which wouldn't have caused for a bleed out open 3. Like, it's just, if those Courtney Kirkland John Goble and Getritis Petritis should be fired immediately. Every single one of them should never make $1 again from the National Basketball Association. And everyone wanted to talk about how gambling was going to impact sports when Shohei Ohtani's interpreter got popped. Everyone focused on the wrong thing. We need to I think referees in sports at this point, with how accessible gambling is, I think they should have their phones monitored 24/7. I'm at that point because I refuse to believe that it's not happening on some small scales. I'm not saying it happened in that game. Who knows? John Goble might be an upstanding individual for all I know. But I just think that is the thing to focus on when everyone's like, it's ruining the enjoyment for the fans and the players, or people are being mean to the players at the game. And even though they're making $20 million more than they were 10 years ago per play, it's just where you should focus is if there's corruption on how the game is officiated. And we know in the NBA, because the worst scandal in the history of the NBA is an NBA referee who was gambling on games he was calling. And guess what? Scott Foster called him 167 times in a 3-week span during the NBA playoffs in the series that Tim Donaghy was accused of fixing and admitted to fixing. 157 times. Tim Donaghy talked to him more than he talked to his wife. But yeah, Scott Foster's still in the league. I'm sure he has no corruption at all. And I'm sure none of the NBA refs have any corruption at all.
It's a tough pill to swallow, man. I'm with you. That report came out and it was
just 82 games. We watched 82 games for this.
Yep.
And it's just what?
One thing after another. It's just like, come on, man. Don't even just like John Gonzalez said, just put the emoji shrug out there and call it a day. Like, let's move on. But I'm with you. It's just rough. And now this Sixers team is coming home, and I'm sure look at the calls on Thursday, and I hope they win the game. But to come back and tie things up against that type of gritty team, you're gonna have to have the want. And I don't know. I know there's a couple players in the team that have the want, and Nick Nurse I love, but a lot of the players on this Sixers team right now kind of suspect to me. The refs are helping us out by what took place in game 2 there in the Garden. Mark Henry Jr., you're helping me out today. Great stuff. I look forward to all your coverage, of course, on Thursday night. Kick butt and take names that the boys will be watching from afar. And, of course, hearing you break it all down on Saturday on a Tough Cover radio show. Any last words before you get out of here?
Cooper DeJean, no matter what, right? Is that the draft day quote? I'll write it down on a piece of paper.
Cooper DeJean, no matter what, let's ride.